Before we dive into Rita and Andreas's journey, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing our community from all over the world. If you enjoy stories of love, resilience, and second chances, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Wishing you a wonderful day. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. Rita Wallace was used to long days and even longer nights. She'd been working 2 jobs for almost 3 years now, ever since her parents passed away, and she became the only family her little brother Eli had left. Most days, she worked the morning shift at a neighborhood bakery, kneading dough before sunrise, then rushed home to make sure Eli got to school on time. In the evenings, she usually worked coat check at a downtown theater, a job that paid just enough to keep the lights on in their tiny apartment in Chicago's South Side. But tonight was different. Rita was supposed to have the night off. She'd planned to help Eli with his science project and maybe even watch a movie together, something they hadn't done in months. But at 4 p.m., her phone buzzed with a desperate text from her friend, Tasha, who worked as a supervisor for a catering company. "Rita, please! I need you to fill in for a cocktail server at the Astoria Grand tonight. It's last minute, but the pay is double. I'll owe you big time." Rita stared at the message, her heart sinking. She didn't want to leave Eli alone again, but double pay was hard to turn down. Rent was due in a week, and the fridge was looking emptier than usual. She called Eli, who was at the library, and explained. He just sighed and said, "It's okay, Rita. I'll be fine. Get that money." So, Rita found herself standing in front of her closet, searching for something that could pass as cocktail chic. She finally settled on a simple black dress she'd borrowed from Tasha months ago and never returned. It was a little too tight at the waist and a little too short for her taste, but it would have to do. She slipped on a pair of borrowed heels, 2 sizes too big, stuffed with tissue paper at the toes, and pulled her hair into a neat bun. By 7 p.m., she was standing in the staff entrance of the Astoria Grand Hotel, a place she'd only ever seen in magazines. The building soared above the city, all glass and gold, with a rooftop that looked out over the Chicago skyline. The event was some kind of private party for the city's elite, businessmen, politicians, and celebrities. Rita could feel the weight of their money in the air, thick as the expensive perfume that drifted through the halls. Inside, everything sparkled. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and the marble floors gleamed under her feet. Waiters in crisp uniforms moved silently between guests, carrying trays of champagne and tiny hors d'oeuvres. Rita clutched her tray, trying to look invisible as she weaved through the crowd. She felt out of place, like a kid playing dress-up in someone else's world. The guests barely glanced at her, except to snap their fingers for another drink. She kept her head down, focusing on the job, counting the hours, until she could go home. But then, as she passed by the balcony, she felt someone watching her. She glanced up and met the eyes of a man standing alone near the windows. He was tall, with dark hair and sharp features, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit. There was something cold and distant about him, like he was used to being in control of every room he entered. Rita recognized him from the news, Andreas Kennedy, the billionaire CEO who owned half the buildings in downtown Chicago. He was famous for his ruthless business deals and his habit of avoiding the spotlight. Their eyes met for just a second, but it was enough to make Rita's heart skip. She quickly looked away, but she could feel his gaze following her as she moved through the crowd. A few minutes later, as she was refilling a guest's glass, she felt a presence at her side. She turned and found herself face to face with Andreas Kennedy. Up close, he was even more intimidating. Tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes that seemed to see right through her. "You're early," he said quietly, his voice low and smooth. Rita blinked, confused. "I'm sorry?" He studied her for a moment, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek black key card with a gold emblem. He pressed it into her hand, his fingers brushing hers for just a second. "Penthouse suite. 30 minutes," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Rita stared at the card, her mind racing. Was this some kind of test? Did he think she was someone else? Before she could say anything, Andreas turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd as quickly as he'd appeared. Rita stood frozen, the key card burning in her palm. She looked around, half expecting someone to jump out and tell her it was all a joke. But no one seemed to notice. The party went on, laughter and music swirling around her. She slipped the card into her pocket, her hands shaking. She had no idea what had just happened, but she knew one thing for sure. Her night had just taken a turn she never could have imagined. As she tried to steady her breathing, Rita glanced at the clock. 30 minutes. Whatever this was, she had half an hour to figure out what to do next. Rita stood in the corner of the ballroom, her heart pounding as she stared at the key card in her hand. The gold emblem glinted under the lights, and she kept running her thumb over it, as if it might suddenly make sense. She felt a mix of emotions, anger, embarrassment, and a strange curiosity. Did Andreas Kennedy really think she was an escort? Was this how things worked in his world, where people just handed out key cards and expected others to follow? She wanted to throw the card away, but the thought of the money she'd make tonight kept her rooted to the spot. Rent, groceries, Eli's school supplies, it all flashed through her mind. She took a shaky breath and tried to focus on her job, but every time she passed a mirror, she caught sight of herself in that borrowed dress and felt like an imposter. After a few minutes, Rita made up her mind. She wasn't going to let some billionaire treat her like she was for sale. She'd find him, give the card back, and tell him exactly what she thought of his offer. She scanned the room, but Andreas was nowhere to be seen. Maybe he'd already gone upstairs. Maybe he was waiting for her to show up, expecting her to play along. Rita slipped out of the ballroom and headed for the elevators, her hands sweating as she clutched the key card. She rehearsed what she'd say in her head, trying to sound confident and unbothered. The elevator doors opened, and she stepped inside, pressing the button for the top floor. But before she could reach the penthouse, two men in dark suits stepped into the elevator with her. They wore earpieces and had the kind of serious faces that made her nervous. One of them glanced at the key card in her hand and nodded. "Ms. Wallace?" he asked quietly. Rita hesitated, then nodded. "Yes?" "Mr. Kennedy is expecting you. This way, please." She wanted to protest, to explain that there had been a mistake, but the men were already guiding her down a quiet hallway, lined with expensive artwork. They stopped in front of a set of double doors and opened them, ushering her into a private lounge that looked more like a billionaire's living room than anything she'd ever seen. Andreas Kennedy was there, standing by the window with his back to her. He turned when he heard the door, his expression unreadable. Rita took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Mr. Kennedy, I think there's been a misunderstanding." He studied her for a moment, his eyes sharp but not unkind. "You're not who I was expecting." "No, I'm not," Rita said, her voice steady. "I'm just working the event tonight. I think you thought I was someone else." Andreas didn't look embarrassed or angry. Instead, he seemed interested. He walked over and took the key card from her hand, turning it over between his fingers. "You handled that well," he said quietly. "Most people would have just gone along with it." Rita shrugged, trying to hide how nervous she felt. I'm not most people, and I'm definitely not for sale. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. I can see that. Tell me, what's your name? Rita Wallace. He nodded, as if committing it to memory. Rita, do you always speak your mind like this? Only when someone tries to hand me a hotel key like it's a business card, she replied, surprising herself with her own boldness. Andreas laughed, a low, genuine sound that made him seem almost human. He gestured for her to sit, and she perched on the edge of a leather sofa, still unsure if she was in trouble or about to be thrown out. I like people who don't play games, he said. I need someone like that in my office. My last assistant quit last week, and I haven't found anyone who can keep up. You seem quick on your feet. Rita blinked, not sure she'd heard him right. Are you offering me a job? He nodded. Executive assistant. The hours are long, the work is demanding, and the pay is more than you're making tonight. Much more. Rita stared at him, her mind spinning. Was this some kind of joke? She'd never worked in an office before, let alone for someone like Andreas Kennedy. But the thought of a steady paycheck, of not having to juggle 2 jobs and worry about rent every month, was almost too good to ignore. She hesitated. Why me? You don't even know me. I know enough, Andreas said. You're honest, you don't scare easily, and you're not afraid to stand up for yourself. That's more than I can say for most people I've interviewed. Rita looked down at her hands, thinking of Eli, of their tiny apartment, of all the things she could finally fix if she had a real job. But she also thought of how quickly her life could change, how easy it would be to get in over her head. What's the catch? She asked quietly. No catch, Andreas replied. Just hard work and trust. Rita took a deep breath. She didn't know if she was making the right choice, but she knew she couldn't walk away from this chance. Not when so much was at stake. Okay, she said finally. I'll do it. But, just so you know, I'm not afraid to speak my mind. Andreas smiled. A real smile this time. Good. You'll start tomorrow. My driver will pick you up at 8. Rita stood, still feeling like she was in a dream. She shook his hand, his grip firm and warm. As she left the lounge, the key card still in her pocket, Rita felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. She had no idea what she was getting herself into, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, things were about to change for the better. Rita barely slept that night. She kept replaying the conversation with Andreas Kennedy in her head, wondering if she'd misunderstood something or if it was all some elaborate prank. But when she woke up, there was a text from an unknown number. Driver will arrive at 8 a.m. Kennedy Holdings. She stared at the message for a long moment, then got up and started getting ready. She didn't own any business clothes, so she borrowed a navy skirt and a white blouse from Tasha, who was more than happy to help after hearing the story. Girl, you're about to work for Andreas Kennedy? You better not forget me when you're rich, Tasha teased, pinning Rita's hair back with practiced hands. Eli was already up, eating cereal at the kitchen table. He looked at Rita, his eyes wide. You really got the job? I think so, Rita said, still not quite believing it herself. Wish me luck. Good luck, Eli grinned. Don't let the billionaires scare you. At exactly 8 a.m., a sleek black car pulled up outside their apartment building. The driver, a polite older man named Mr. Harlan, opened the door for her and offered a quiet, "Good morning, Ms. Wallace." Rita tried not to stare at the leather seats or the city skyline as they drove north, but everything felt surreal. Kennedy Holdings was impossible to miss. The building was a tower of glass and steel, rising above the city like it owned the sky. Rita's nerves kicked in as she stepped through the revolving doors into a marble lobby that gleamed under the morning sun. People in sharp suits moved with purpose, barely glancing at her as she checked in at the front desk. The receptionist, a woman with perfect hair and a clipped voice, handed Rita a visitor's badge. "Mr. Kennedy is expecting you. Take the express elevator to the 38th floor." Rita's palms were sweaty as she rode the elevator up, watching the city shrink below her. When the doors opened, she stepped into a world that felt even more intimidating than the hotel the night before. The office was all clean lines, glass walls, and expensive art. Everything was quiet, efficient, and a little cold. A woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense bun approached. "You must be Rita Wallace. I'm Maribel Ortiz, Chief of Staff. Follow me, please." Maribel's heels clicked on the polished floor as she led Rita through a maze of offices. Mr. Kennedy's schedule is tight. He expects punctuality and discretion. If you have questions, ask me. If you're unsure, ask me. If you make a mistake, own it and move on. Rita nodded, trying to keep up. Understood. Maribel stopped at a glass-walled office. "This is your workspace. You'll be right next to Mr. Kennedy's office. He likes things quiet, so keep personal calls to a minimum." Rita set her borrowed bag on the desk and took a deep breath. The view from the window was breathtaking. Lake Michigan sparkled in the distance, and the city buzzed below. She barely had time to take it in before Maribel handed her a thick folder. "Here's the onboarding packet. Read it. Memorize his preferences. He hates cold coffee, loves handwritten notes, and expects his calendar to be flawless. Carter will be by soon to introduce himself." As Maribel left, Rita glanced around. The office was busy but strangely silent. People moved quickly, eyes on their screens, barely acknowledging her. She could feel the stares, though, quick glances, whispered conversations just out of earshot. She knew what they were thinking. Who is she? How did she get this job? A few minutes later, a tall man in a tailored suit appeared at her door. He looked about 30, with sandy hair and a confident smile. "You must be the new assistant, Carter Linton, VP of Operations." He shook her hand, his grip firm. "Welcome to the circus." Rita smiled nervously. "Thanks. I'm still figuring out where the lions are." Carter laughed. "Oh, you'll find them. Just keep your head down and don't take anything personally. This place eats new people alive." He leaned in, lowering his voice. "Word travels fast here. People are already talking about you. Don't let it get to you. Kennedy's a tough boss, but he's fair. If you can keep up, you'll be fine." Rita nodded, grateful for the advice. "I'll do my best." Carter winked. "That's all anyone can do." The rest of the morning was a blur. Rita read through the onboarding packet, learning everything from Andreas's favorite brand of coffee to the way he liked his emails formatted. She set up her computer, organized her desk, and tried to ignore the curious looks from passing employees. At 10 a.m. sharp, Maribel appeared again. "Mr. Kennedy will see you now." Rita smoothed her skirt and followed Maribel into Andreas's office. The room was spacious but not flashy, just a big desk, a wall of windows, and a few pieces of modern art. Andreas stood by the window, looking out at the city. He turned as they entered. "Good morning, Rita." "Good morning, Mr. Kennedy," she replied, trying to sound confident. He gestured to a chair. "Sit. Let's go over today's schedule." For the next hour, Andreas rattled off meetings, calls, and tasks at a pace that made Rita's head spin. He was demanding, but never rude. He expected her to keep up, to anticipate his needs before he even voiced them. When she made a mistake, mixing up the time for a conference call, He didn't yell. He just corrected her, his tone calm but firm. "Pay attention to details," he said. "That's what separates good assistants from great ones." Rita nodded, jotting down notes as fast as she could. She was determined not to let him down. By lunchtime, her head was pounding. She escaped to the break room, where a few employees sat eating salads and scrolling through their phones. The conversation stopped when she walked in. Rita tried to ignore it, pouring herself a cup of coffee and sitting at an empty table. A woman with curly hair and a kind smile slid into the seat across from her. "You're the new assistant, right? I'm Janelle. I work in HR." Rita smiled, relieved. "Yeah, that's me, Rita." Janelle leaned in, lowering her voice. "Don't mind the stares. People here love gossip. They'll get bored soon enough." Rita laughed, feeling some of the tension melt away. "I hope so. I feel like I'm on a reality show." Janelle grinned. "Just wait until the next scandal. You'll be old news." After lunch, Rita dove back into work. She double-checked Andreas's calendar, organized files, and answered emails. She made a few mistakes, sending a memo to the wrong department, forgetting to attach a document. But Maribel was patient, guiding her through each correction. By the end of the day, Rita was exhausted. Her feet ached, her head throbbed, but she felt a strange sense of accomplishment. She'd survived her first day in the lion's den. As she packed up to leave, Carter stopped by her desk. "You made it through day one. That's more than some people can say." Rita smiled, her nerves finally settling. "Thanks. I think I'll sleep for a week." He laughed. "Get used to it. Around here, the days only get longer." Rita left the building as the sun was setting, the city glowing gold and pink. She called Eli on the way home, telling him about the view, the office, and the people she'd met. He listened quietly, then said, "I'm proud of you, Rita." She smiled, her heart full. Maybe she didn't fit in yet, and maybe the job would only get harder. But for the first time in a long time, Rita felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Rita had barely settled into her new routine at Kennedy Holdings when the next challenge landed in her lap. It was a Thursday morning, and she was reviewing Andreas's calendar when Maribel appeared at her desk, looking more serious than usual. "Mr. Kennedy wants you in the conference room now," Maribel said, her voice brisk. Rita grabbed her notepad and hurried down the hall, her mind racing with possibilities. When she entered the room, Andreas was already there, along with Carter and a few other executives. The table was covered in folders, event plans, and glossy invitations. Andreas looked up. "Rita, I need you to coordinate the annual Kennedy Foundation Gala. It's in 2 weeks." Rita blinked, caught off guard. "Me? I've never—" "You'll have support from the events team, but I want you in charge," Andreas said, his tone final. "It's our biggest charity event of the year. The guest list is complicated." Carter gave her an encouraging nod. "You'll do fine. Just keep the donors happy and the press out of trouble." Rita nodded, trying to hide her nerves. She'd never planned anything bigger than Eli's birthday party, but she wasn't about to back down. "I'll get started right away." The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind. Rita worked late every night, juggling caterers, florists, and last-minute changes to the guest list. She learned quickly that nothing in Andreas's world was simple. Every detail mattered, and every mistake could end up in the society pages. The day of the gala arrived faster than she expected. Rita stood in the grand ballroom of the Astoria Grand Hotel, clipboard in hand, checking off the final details. The room sparkled with crystal chandeliers and fresh flowers. Waiters in white gloves moved quietly, setting tables and arranging champagne flutes. Rita wore a simple navy dress she'd borrowed from Janelle. her hair pulled back in a neat twist. She felt nervous, but proud. She'd made it this far, and she was determined not to let anyone down. As the guests began to arrive, Rita moved through the crowd, making sure everything ran smoothly. She greeted donors, directed staff, and kept an eye on the press. She was so focused on her tasks that she almost didn't notice the woman who swept into the room, surrounded by a small group of admirers. Celeste Drayton was impossible to miss. She was tall and elegant, with flawless makeup and a designer gown that probably cost more than Rita's rent for a year. Celeste was a well-known socialite and PR maven, famous for her connections and her icy charm. She was also, as Rita had learned from office gossip, Andreas's ex-fiancée. Celeste made a beeline for Andreas, who greeted her with polite formality. Rita tried to stay out of the way, but as she passed by, Celeste's eyes landed on her. "And who are you?" Celeste asked, her voice smooth but cold. "I'm Rita Wallace. I'm coordinating the event tonight," Rita replied, forcing a smile. Celeste's lips curled into a faint, dismissive smile. "Oh, I see. Andreas always did have a soft spot for interesting projects." Rita felt her cheeks burn, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm just here to make sure everything goes well." Celeste leaned in, her tone dropping. "You know, in this world, people remember where you came from. Don't get too comfortable." Before Rita could respond, Celeste turned away, her laughter trailing behind her as she rejoined her friends. Rita took a deep breath and focused on her work, but the encounter left her rattled. She could feel eyes on her all night, guests whispering, staff glancing her way, as if they were all waiting for her to slip up. The rumors about her hiring, about her background, seemed to grow louder with every passing hour. Despite the pressure, the event was a success. The auction raised more money than ever before, and the press coverage was glowing. Andreas gave a short, heartfelt speech, thanking the donors and the staff. When he finished, he made his way through the crowd, stopping beside Rita. "You did well tonight," he said quietly, his eyes searching hers. "Thank you," Rita replied, trying to sound confident. It was a team effort. Andreas glanced around, noticing the way people were looking at her. For the first time, his expression softened. "Don't let them get to you. People talk. It's what they do." Rita nodded, grateful for his words. "I'm used to it." He hesitated, then added, "If anyone gives you trouble, let me know." It was a small gesture, but it meant more to Rita than she could say. For the first time, she felt like Andreas saw her, not just as an employee, but as a person trying her best in a world that wasn't always kind. As the night wound down and the last guests left, Rita stood on the balcony, looking out over the city lights. She felt tired but proud, knowing she'd survived another test. The whispers and rumors still stung, but she reminded herself that she'd earned her place here, no matter what anyone said. Inside, Andreas watched her from across the room, a thoughtful look on his face. For the first time, Rita wondered if maybe she wasn't as alone as she thought. The Monday after the gala, Rita woke up to her phone buzzing non-stop. At first, she thought it was just the usual morning alarms and reminders, but when she finally checked her notifications, her heart dropped. There were dozens of messages, some from numbers she didn't recognize, others from friends, and a few from Eli. All of them were about the same thing, a tabloid article that had gone viral overnight. She clicked the link, her hands shaking. The headline screamed at her in bold letters, "Billionaire's new assistant. More than meets the eye?" The article was full of speculation and innuendo. It used photos from the hotel the night she met Andreas, and more from the gala, showing her standing close to him, handing him a drink, or talking quietly in a corner. The writer hinted that Rita had been personally selected for reasons that had nothing to do with her resume. There were even anonymous quotes from sources who claimed she'd come out of nowhere and was always around Andreas. Rita felt sick. She scrolled through the comments, hoping to find someone defending her, but most were cruel. Some called her a gold digger. Others said worse. She wanted to throw her phone across the room. Eli's message was the only one that made her pause. "Don't let them get to you. You know who you are. I do too." Rita took a deep breath and got ready for work, even though every part of her wanted to hide. She wore her plainest clothes and kept her head down as she rode the train to Kennedy Holdings. The city felt different that morning, colder, sharper, like everyone was watching her. When she walked into the office, the change was immediate. Conversations stopped as she passed. People stared openly, some whispering behind their hands. Even the receptionist, who usually greeted her with a smile, just nodded stiffly. Rita tried to focus on her work, but it was impossible to ignore the tension. Her inbox was flooded with messages, some supportive, most not. She could feel the weight of every glance, every whispered conversation. She wanted to disappear. Around mid-morning, Maribel appeared at her desk, her face unreadable. "HR wants to see you. Now." Rita's stomach twisted. She followed Maribel down the hall, her heart pounding. The HR office was small and windowless, with a table and 2 chairs. Janelle from HR was there, looking uncomfortable. "Rita, please have a seat," Janelle said gently. Rita sat, folding her hands in her lap to keep them from shaking. "We need to talk about the article," Janelle began. "There are concerns about the nature of your relationship with Mr. Kennedy. Some staff have raised questions." Rita felt her cheeks burn. "I was hired to do a job. That's all." Janelle nodded. "I believe you, but we have to follow protocol. There will be a review. In the meantime, please avoid any unnecessary contact with Mr. Kennedy outside of work duties." Rita nodded, biting her lip. She wanted to scream, to tell them how unfair this was, but she knew it wouldn't help. When she returned to her desk, she found Andreas waiting for her. He looked tired, his jaw tight. "Come with me," he said quietly. She followed him into his office, closing the door behind her. He turned to face her, his eyes searching. "Is there anything I need to know?" he asked, his voice low. Rita met his gaze, refusing to look away. "Number I was hired to be your assistant. That's all I've ever been." He studied her for a long moment. "You know how this looks." "I know how it looks," she said, her voice steady. "But I can't control what people say. I can only control what I do." Andreas nodded slowly. "I believe you. But this is going to get worse, before it gets better." Rita swallowed hard. "I can handle it." He hesitated, then said, "If you want to take some time off, I'll understand." Rita shook her head. "I'm not running away. I need this job." Andreas looked at her, something like respect in his eyes. "All right. But if anyone gives you trouble, you come to me." She nodded, grateful for his support, but she knew it wouldn't be enough to stop the rumors. The rest of the day was a blur. People avoided her in the halls. Some were openly hostile, making snide comments when they thought she couldn't hear. Others just stared, their eyes full of judgment. Rita tried to keep her head down, focusing on her work, but it was hard not to feel like she was drowning. At lunch, she sat alone in the break room, picking at a sandwich she couldn't bring herself to eat. Janelle stopped by, offering a quiet word of encouragement. "Hang in there, Rita. This place has a short memory. Something new will come along soon." Rita managed a weak smile. Thanks. When she got home that night, Eli was waiting for her. He'd made spaghetti, and they ate in silence for a while. Finally, he looked up. "Are you okay?" he asked. Rita shook her head. "Not really. I feel like everyone hates me. Like I don't belong there." Eli reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You do belong there. You worked hard for that job. Don't let some stupid article take it away from you." Rita blinked back tears. "It's not that easy." "I know," Eli said softly. "But you always told me to stand up for myself. Maybe it's your turn now." Rita smiled, a real smile this time. "You're right. I can't let them win." That night, she lay awake, thinking about everything that had happened. She thought about quitting, about finding another job, something quieter and safer. But then she remembered how proud she'd felt when she got the offer, how hard she'd worked to prove herself. She wasn't going to let a bunch of strangers take that away from her. The next morning, Rita walked into Kennedy Holdings with her head held high. The whispers were still there, the stares just as sharp, but she ignored them. She focused on her work, on doing her job better than anyone else could. Andreas noticed. He started giving her more responsibility, trusting her with bigger projects. Maribel, who had been distant at first, began to warm up, offering advice and support. Even Carter, who loved office gossip, started defending her when people talked behind her back. It wasn't easy. Some days were harder than others. But Rita kept going. Fueled by her brother's words and her own stubborn pride, she refused to let the scandal define her. Slowly, things began to change. The office moved on to new gossip, and the stares faded. Rita still felt the sting of the rumors, but she knew she'd survived something most people couldn't. She'd fought for her place, and she wasn't going to give it up. By the end of the month, Rita realized something important. She didn't just work at Kennedy Holdings, she belonged there, and no headline could take that away from her. It was a Thursday evening, and the city was wrapped in a heavy summer storm. Rain hammered the windows of Kennedy Holdings, and thunder rolled across the sky. Most of the staff had left early, worried about the weather and the flickering lights. But Rita was still at her desk, finishing up a stack of reports Andreas needed for a meeting the next morning. She glanced at the clock, almost 8 p.m. She should have been home hours ago, but she wanted to prove she could handle the extra work Andreas had given her. She was so focused on her screen that she didn't notice the building growing quieter, or the way the storm outside was getting worse. Suddenly, the lights flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. The hum of computers and air conditioning died, replaced by the sound of rain and distant sirens. Rita sat frozen for a moment, her heart pounding. She fumbled for her phone, using the flashlight to find her way out of her cubicle. The emergency lights in the hallway glowed dimly, casting long shadows. Rita made her way toward Andreas's office, hoping he was still there. She found him standing by the window, looking out at the city, his face lit by the occasional flash of lightning. "Power's out," Rita said, trying to sound calm. Andreas turned, his expression unreadable. "I noticed. The backup generator should keep the basics running, but the elevators are down. We're stuck here for a while." Rita tried to laugh, but it came out shaky. "Well, at least we have a view." Andreas smiled just a little. "You're not afraid of storms?" She shook her head. "Not really. I grew up in Chicago. Storms are just part of life." He nodded, then gestured to the small seating area in his office. "Sit. No point in standing around." Rita sat on the edge of the couch, her hands folded in her lap. Andreas sat across from her, silent for a moment. The only light came from the city outside, flickering and uncertain. After a while, Andreas spoke. You handled the scandal well. Most people would have quit. Rita shrugged. I thought about it. But I need this job. And I didn't want to let them win. He studied her, his eyes softer than usual. You're tougher than you look. Rita smiled. I've had to be. My parents died when I was 20. I've been taking care of my little brother ever since. There's no one else. Andreas was quiet, listening. That's a lot to carry. Yeah, Rita said, her voice low. But Eli's a good kid. He keeps me going. Andreas leaned back, his posture relaxing. I know what it's like to lose people. My father died when I was young. My mother, she was never really there. I learned early not to trust anyone. Rita looked at him, surprised by his honesty. That sounds lonely. He nodded. It is, but it makes business easier. You can't get hurt if you don't let anyone close. Rita thought about that. But you still get hurt, just in different ways. Andreas looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment the mask he always wore slipped. Maybe you're right. They sat in silence, listening to the rain. Rita felt the tension in the room shift, something softer settling between them. Why did you hire me? She asked quietly. Really? Andreas hesitated. At first, it was a mistake. I thought you were someone else. But then I saw how you handled yourself. You didn't flinch. You didn't try to impress me. You just were yourself. I needed that. Rita nodded, understanding more than she expected. I'm not good at pretending. That's rare, Andreas said. Most people in my world are always pretending. Rita smiled, a real smile this time. Maybe that's why I don't fit in. He shook his head. You fit in better than you think. The storm raged outside, but inside the office, things felt strangely peaceful. Rita found herself relaxing, the stress of the past weeks fading just a little. Do you ever get tired of it? She asked. All the pressure, the expectations? Andreas looked out the window. Every day. But I don't know how to stop. This company. It's all I have. Rita nodded. I get that. Sometimes I wonder what my life would be like if things had been different. If my parents were still here. If I didn't have to work so hard. Andreas was quiet for a long time. Do you regret it? Rita thought about Eli, about the nights they spent laughing over cheap pizza, about the pride she felt when he brought home good grades. I just wish it was easier sometimes. He smiled, a small, sad smile. Me too. The lights flickered, then came back on for a moment before dying again. Rita laughed. Guess we're not getting out of here anytime soon. Andreas stood and walked to a cabinet, pulling out a bottle of water and 2 glasses. He handed one to Rita and sat back down. To surviving storms, he said, raising his glass. Rita clinked her glass against his. To surviving storms. They talked for a while longer, sharing stories about their childhoods, their fears, and the things they wished they could change. Rita found herself telling Andreas things she'd never told anyone at work. About her dreams, her worries, and the way she sometimes felt invisible. Andreas listened, really listened, and shared his own stories in return. He talked about his failed engagement, about the friends he'd lost to ambition and betrayal, about the loneliness that came with success. By the time the storm began to fade and the emergency lights flickered back to life, Rita felt like something had shifted between them. The walls they'd both built were still there, but they weren't as high as before. As they gathered their things, preparing to leave, Andreas paused at the door. Thank you, Rita, for staying, for talking. She smiled, feeling a warmth she hadn't expected. Thank you for listening. They rode the stairs down together, the building quiet around them. When they reached the lobby, Andreas turned to her. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be another long day." Rita nodded. "You too." As she stepped out into the damp, quiet city, Rita felt lighter than she had in weeks. The storm had passed, but something new had begun. A fragile understanding, a sense that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone as she thought. But as she walked home, she couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. The night had changed things between her and Andreas, and she knew that nothing would ever be quite the same again. The days after the blackout felt different for Rita. She and Andreas shared a quiet understanding now, a sense that they'd both let their guard down, even if just for a night. Work was still busy, but the tension between them had softened. Andreas was more approachable, sometimes even asking about Eli or offering Rita a rare, genuine smile. But peace never lasted long at Kennedy Holdings. One morning, Rita arrived at her desk to find her inbox flooded with new messages. At first, she thought it was just the usual work chaos, but as she scrolled, her stomach dropped. There were dozens of emails, all with the same subject line. "Did you see this?" Or, "Thought you should know." Some were from colleagues, others from strangers. A few were just links, but most included screenshots of a new rumor spreading like wildfire. Someone had started an anonymous email campaign, sending out a message to nearly everyone in the company, and even some clients. The email was full of lies, painting Rita as someone who had manipulated her way into her job, using personal favors to get close to Andreas. It included more photos, some from the gala, others from the office, all twisted to look suspicious. The language was cruel, and the message was clear. Rita didn't belong. Rita's hands shook as she read the words. She felt sick, angry, and helpless all at once. She wanted to scream, to cry, to run away and never come back. But she forced herself to breathe, to stay calm. She'd survived worse. Maribel appeared at her desk, her face tight with concern. "Come with me, Rita. Andreas wants to see you." Rita followed Maribel down the hall, her heart pounding. When they reached Andreas's office, he was already on the phone, his voice cold and sharp. He ended the call and looked up at Rita, his eyes full of anger. Not at her, but at the situation. "Sit down," he said quietly. Rita sat, her hands clenched in her lap. "I'm sorry this is happening," Andreas said. "I've already started an internal investigation. We'll find out who did this." Rita nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why does this keep happening? What did I ever do to deserve this?" Andreas's jaw tightened. "You did nothing wrong. Some people can't stand to see others succeed, especially when they think it should have been them." He stood and paced the room, his anger barely contained. "I promise you, Rita, I will get to the bottom of this." The next few days were a blur of tension and whispers. The office was divided. Some people believed the rumors, others defended Rita. But everyone was talking. Rita tried to keep her head down, focusing on her work, but it was impossible to ignore the stares and the gossip. Andreas worked behind the scenes, using his connections and resources to trace the emails. He brought in the IT team, who combed through the company's servers, looking for any clue. It didn't take long for them to find the source. One afternoon, Andreas called Rita into his office. Maribel was there, along with Carter and a member of the IT team. Andreas looked serious, but there was a glint of satisfaction in his eyes. "We found out who sent the emails," he said. "It was Celeste." Rita stared at him, shocked. "Celeste? But why?" Andreas's expression hardened. She wanted revenge. She couldn't stand being replaced, especially not by someone she saw as beneath her. She used her old access to our systems to send the emails. She thought she could ruin you and hurt me in the process." Rita felt a wave of anger and relief. "What happens now?" Andreas didn't hesitate. "She's finished. I've already cut all business ties with her. She's been removed from every project, every partnership. She won't be welcome in any of my circles again." Carter nodded. "Word travels fast in this city. She'll have a hard time finding anyone to work with her now." Maribel placed a gentle hand on Rita's shoulder. "You did nothing wrong. Don't let her take your confidence." Andreas turned to Rita, his voice softer. "I'm going to make a public statement. I'll clear your name. You deserve that much." True to his word, Andreas released a statement to the press and the company, explaining that the rumors were false and that the person responsible had been dealt with. He praised Rita's professionalism and integrity, making it clear that she was valued and trusted. The statement helped. The emails stopped, and the office slowly returned to normal. Some people apologized to Rita, others just avoided her. But the worst had passed. Still, the experience left Rita shaken. She realized how quickly things could turn, how fragile her place in this world really was. She was grateful for Andreas's support, but she also knew she couldn't rely on anyone else to protect her. She had to be strong for herself. And for Eli. Andreas seemed changed, too. He was quieter, more thoughtful, as if the betrayal had reminded him how easily trust could be broken. He checked in on Rita more often, sometimes just stopping by her desk to ask how she was doing. There was a new respect between them, a sense that they'd both survived something together. One evening, as Rita was packing up to leave, Andreas stopped her in the hallway. "I'm sorry you had to go through all this," he said quietly. "You didn't deserve any of it." Rita smiled, tired but grateful. "Thank you for believing in me." He nodded. "Always." As Rita walked out into the cool night air, she felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. She'd been vindicated, but the scars remained. Still, she knew she was stronger now, and that no one, not even someone like Celeste, could take away what she'd earned. Even after Andreas cleared her name and the office gossip faded, Rita couldn't shake the feeling that something inside her had changed. She was grateful for Andreas's public support, but she couldn't forget the moment he'd looked her in the eye and asked if there was anything he needed to know. That question had stung more than any rumor. It was a reminder that, deep down, he'd doubted her, if only for a second. The days at Kennedy Holdings felt heavier. Rita went through the motions, answering emails, organizing meetings, and keeping Andreas's schedule running like clockwork, but the spark she'd once felt was gone. She caught herself staring out the window, watching the city move below, wondering if she'd ever truly belonged here. Eli noticed the change, too. He'd always been her biggest cheerleader, but now he watched her with worried eyes. One night, as they ate dinner in their tiny kitchen, he finally spoke up. "Rita, you don't have to stay there if it's making you miserable," he said quietly. She looked at him, surprised. "I worked so hard for this job, Eli. I don't want to just give up." He shrugged. "You didn't give up. You survived. But you don't owe them anything. You don't owe anyone your happiness." Rita thought about that all night. She remembered the girl she'd been when she first walked into Kennedy Holdings, nervous, hopeful, determined to prove herself. Now, she just felt tired. She wanted peace. She wanted to breathe without feeling like she was being watched or judged. The next morning, Rita made her decision. She typed up her resignation letter, kept it short and professional, and printed it out. Her hands shook as she walked into Andreas's office. He looked up, surprised to see her. Rita, is everything all right? She handed him the letter. I'm resigning, Andreas. Effective immediately. He stared at the paper, then at her. Why? You know you're valued here. After everything. She shook her head. I appreciate what you did, but I can't stay. Not after everything that's happened. I need a fresh start. For me, and for Eli. Andreas was silent for a long moment. Is there anything I can do to change your mind? Rita smiled sadly. I think this is just the right thing for me. He nodded, looking more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. I'm sorry, Rita, for doubting you, for not protecting you sooner. She felt a lump in her throat, but managed to keep her voice steady. Thank you for saying that. I hope you find what you're looking for, Andreas. She packed up her things quietly, avoiding the curious stares of her co-workers. Maribel hugged her tightly, whispering, You're stronger than you know. Carter stopped by, looking genuinely sad. The place won't be the same without you, Rita. By the end of the day, her desk was empty. She took one last look at the office, the city skyline beyond the glass, and then she walked out, her head held high. That night, Rita and Eli packed their bags. They didn't have much, just a few suitcases, some books, and the memories of a life that had been harder than it should have been. Eli was excited, talking about all the things they'd do in Wisconsin. We'll have space, Rita. Trees, fresh air, maybe even a dog. They left before sunrise, driving north as the city faded behind them. The highway was quiet, the world still waking up. Rita felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. She was leaving behind everything she'd worked for, but she was also leaving behind the pain, the doubt, and the constant pressure to prove herself. They arrived in a small town just over the Wisconsin border. It was nothing like Chicago, no skyscrapers, no endless traffic, just quiet streets and friendly faces. They rented a little house with a porch and a yard. Eli started at the local high school, and Rita found a job at a bakery, the kind of place where everyone knew your name. For the first time in years, Rita felt like she could breathe. She spent her mornings baking bread and her afternoons walking by the lake. She and Eli cooked dinner together, watched movies, and talked about their dreams. Life was simple, but it was good. Back in Chicago, Andreas felt Rita's absence like a missing piece. The office ran smoothly, but it felt colder, emptier. He found himself reaching for his phone to text her, only to remember she was gone. He replayed their last conversation over and over, wishing he'd said more, done more. He realized, too late, that he'd let his own fears and doubts push her away. He'd built his life on control and certainty, but with Rita, he'd learned that trust was more important than power. He missed her honesty, her laughter, the way she challenged him to be better. Andreas spent long nights in his office, staring out at the city, wondering if he'd ever get a chance to make things right. He knew he couldn't undo the past, but he hoped someday he'd find a way to tell Rita how much she'd meant to him, not just as an assistant, but as the person who'd changed his life. For now, all he could do was wait, and hope that wherever she was, Rita had finally found the peace she deserved. The weeks in Wisconsin passed quietly for Rita and Eli. The small town was a world away from Chicago's noise and pressure. Rita found comfort in the simple routines: early mornings at the bakery, afternoons spent reading on the porch, and evenings cooking with Eli. She felt herself slowly healing, the old anxiety and tension melting away with each peaceful day. But sometimes, late at night, she'd lie awake thinking about everything she'd left behind. She wondered if Andreas ever thought about her, if he missed their conversations, or the way they'd started to understand each other. She tried to push those thoughts aside, telling herself she was better off now, but a small part of her still ached for closure. One Saturday morning, Rita was kneading dough in the bakery's kitchen when the bell above the front door jingled. She wiped her hands on her apron and stepped out to the counter, expecting to see a regular customer. Instead, she froze. Andreas Kennedy stood there, looking out of place in his city suit, his hair a little messier than she remembered. He looked tired, but his eyes were focused on her, full of something she couldn't quite name. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The bakery was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft clatter of dishes in the back. Finally, Rita found her voice. "Andreas, what are you doing here?" He took a deep breath, his hands in his pockets. "I needed to see you. I know I should have called, but I was afraid you wouldn't answer." Rita's heart pounded. She glanced around, then motioned for him to sit at a small table by the window. She poured him a cup of coffee, her hands only shaking a little. Andreas sat, looking more nervous than she'd ever seen him. "I owe you an apology, Rita. Not as your boss, but as a person. I let my doubts get in the way. I should have trusted you from the start. I'm sorry for everything you went through because of me." Rita sat across from him, her guard up. "It wasn't just you, Andreas. That place, it was never really mine. I always felt like I was fighting to prove I belonged." He nodded, his eyes sad. "I know. And I made it harder. I thought I was protecting myself, but all I did was push away the one person who actually cared about the truth." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. Andreas leaned forward, his voice softer. "I didn't come here to ask you to come back to Kennedy Holdings. I came because I miss you. Not as my assistant, but as you. I want a chance to start over, as equals, as partners." Rita looked down at her hands, unsure. "I don't know, Andreas. My life is different now. I'm not sure I want to go back to that world." He nodded. "I understand. I'm not asking you to give up what you've found here. I just want to be part of your life, if you'll let me. I want to build something real, together. No secrets, no power games, just honesty." Rita studied him, searching his face for any sign of the old Andreas, the one who hid behind walls and control. But he looked open, vulnerable, and more real than she'd ever seen him. She took a deep breath. "I'm scared, Andreas. I don't want to lose myself again. I don't want to be someone's project or someone's secret." He reached across the table, his hand gentle. "You won't be. I promise. I want you to be my equal, my partner. I want to learn how to trust, how to let someone in. I want to try, with you." Rita felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them away. "It won't be easy." He smiled, a little crooked. "Nothing worth having ever is." They talked for a long time about their fears and hopes, about what a real partnership would look like. Rita told him about her dreams, maybe opening her own bakery one day, maybe traveling, maybe just being happy. Andreas shared his own hopes, his desire to build a life that wasn't just about business and power. By the time the sun was high in the sky, Rita felt something shift inside her. The pain and anger were still there, but so was the possibility of something new, something honest. As Andreas stood to leave, he looked at her, hope shining in his eyes. "I'll be here, Rita. However long it takes. I want to do this right." She smiled, feeling lighter than she had in months. "Let's take it one day at a time." He nodded, relief and gratitude in his expression. One day at a time. As he walked out into the bright Wisconsin morning, Rita watched him go, her heart full of hope and uncertainty. She didn't know what the future would hold, but for the first time, she was willing to find out. Rita took her time before making any decisions. She and Andreas kept in touch, talking on the phone and exchanging messages. He visited Wisconsin a few more times, always respecting her space, never pushing her to rush. They talked about everything: her work at the bakery, Eli's new friends, his own efforts to change the culture at Kennedy Holdings. For the first time, their conversations felt easy, honest, and real. One afternoon, Andreas called with news. "We're starting a new division at Kennedy Holdings, one focused on community outreach and employee well-being. I want you to lead it, Rita. You'll have full autonomy, your own team, and the freedom to build something meaningful. No more being someone's assistant. This is your vision." Rita was stunned. She'd never imagined herself in a leadership role, but the idea excited her. She thought about it for days, talking it over with Eli, who was now thriving in his new school. "You always said you wanted to make a difference," he told her. "Maybe this is your chance." With Eli's blessing and her own heart finally steady, Rita agreed. She packed up their little house in Wisconsin, hugged her new friends goodbye, and returned to Chicago. Not as the nervous girl who'd once felt out of place, but as a woman ready to shape her own future. The first day back at Kennedy Holdings was nothing like her first day as Andreas's assistant. This time, she walked through the glass doors with her head high, wearing a simple but sharp suit she'd bought just for the occasion. The receptionist greeted her warmly, and even the security guard gave her a respectful nod. Maribel was waiting for her in the lobby, a huge smile on her face. "Welcome back, Director Wallace," she said, hugging Rita tightly. "We've missed you." Carter stopped by her new office, which had a view of the city and enough space for a small team. "You're the talk of the building," he said, grinning. "But this time, it's all good things." Rita spent her first week meeting with employees, listening to their ideas, and building a team that reflected the diversity and heart of the company. She made it clear that her door was always open, and people responded. The office felt different, warmer, more welcoming. Even the old gossips seemed to have moved on, replaced by a new sense of respect. Andreas kept his promise, too. He was more open, not just with Rita, but with everyone. He started joining team lunches, asking for feedback, and even laughing at Carter's terrible jokes. He and Rita worked closely, but their relationship was no longer a secret or a source of gossip. It was built on mutual respect, trust, and a quiet understanding that they were equals. Outside of work, Rita and Andreas took things slow. They went for walks along the lake, cooked dinner together, and spent time with Eli, who had decided to finish high school in Chicago. Sometimes they argued, sometimes they laughed until they cried, but they always talked things through. There were no more secrets, no more walls. Months passed, and Rita's division flourished. She launched programs to support single parents, created scholarships for local students, and organized volunteer days that brought the whole company together. Employees who had once felt invisible now had a voice, and the company's reputation in the city soared. The real test came at the annual Kennedy Foundation Gala, the same event that had once nearly destroyed Rita's career. This year, she was in charge, not just of the planning, but of the entire evening. The ballroom at the Astoria Grand Hotel sparkled with lights and laughter, and Rita moved through the crowd with confidence, greeting guests and making sure everything ran smoothly. As the evening reached its peak, Andreas took the stage to give a short speech. He spoke about the company's new direction, the importance of community, and the power of second chances. Then, to Rita's surprise, he called her up to join him. None of this would have been possible without the vision and dedication of Rita Wallace, he said, his voice full of pride. She's shown us all what it means to lead with heart. The room erupted in applause as Rita stepped onto the stage. She looked out at the crowd, her colleagues, her friends, even Eli beaming from the front row, and felt a wave of gratitude. She spoke simply, from the heart, about the journey that had brought her here, about the mistakes and the lessons, and about the hope she had for the future. After the speeches, as the music played and the guests mingled, Andreas found Rita on the balcony, away from the noise. He handed her a small box, his eyes shining with affection. "What's this?" she asked, opening it. Inside was a delicate silver charm bracelet, each charm representing a part of her journey. A tiny loaf of bread for her bakery days, a book for her love of learning, a star for the night she'd survived the storm, and a heart for the new life they were building together. Rita's eyes filled with tears. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Andreas took her hand, his voice gentle. "You brought your own light into my world, Rita. I just want to remind you of that. Every day." She smiled, slipping the bracelet onto her wrist. "Thank you, Andreas, for everything." They stood together, looking out over the city, the past finally behind them and the future wide open. Rita knew there would still be challenges, still be days when she doubted herself. But she also knew she wasn't alone anymore. She had found her place, her purpose, and her partner. As the night wore on, Rita danced with Eli, laughed with her team, and felt more at home than she ever had before. She realized that sometimes the best chapters in life begin with a mistake, a wrong turn, a misunderstanding, a moment of doubt. What mattered was what you did next, how you chose to grow, and who you chose to walk beside. And as the story of Rita Wallace and Andreas Kennedy came full circle, it was clear that their journey was just beginning. They had built something real, something honest, strong, and full of hope. If you enjoyed Rita and Andreas's story, don't forget to like, share, and comment below. Tell us what you loved most, or what you'd like to see in future stories. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt tales of love, resilience, and second chances. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for being part of this journey. Until next time, remember, sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places.